And Bryan, that is why Six Pack is the most quotable movie ever.
I'm laughing because as we're recording now, I was humming, and Zoom just asked me, are you playing music?" No, I'm not playing music. And we're
It's not
back.
music. It's not music, and
We're
it's
a musical people.
Six Pack is not the most quotable movie ever, but it's close. This is Dream Idiots. My name is Morris. That's Bryan. Each week we tell each other stories, bring you along for the ride. You can find everything you need about us at dreamidiots.com.
Hmm.
And we've got a few updates for this episode, but if you are listening and you haven't had a chance to, please leave us a review. We've got hopefully picked up some new listeners this weekend and regular subscribers, but please keep listening, reviewing, and send us any information, things you want to talk about, story ideas, any of that stuff as well. You can send it all to dreamidiots.com now.
Yep, the contact form there actually now I think goes to Morris, so
It
he'll actually
does,
get
yeah.
that. Or you can just email us at dreamidiotspodcast@gmail. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. The website is new and improved with merch and other chit for you to download and look at. And then, for reasons I can't quite understand, we had our biggest single day of downloads ever over the weekend. I don't know why, but I don't really understand it. But someone found us and downloaded fucking everything. So great.
Let's hope it's the right someone's. Um, two updates real quickly, right? The first
Oh,
one is that your buddy Grant Harden was caught. The devil in the Ozarks
my
has been
buddy.
apprehended.
Great. Yes, scumbag made it a mile and a half from where he escaped the prison in Bentonville or wherever the hell he was. Yeah, what a awful human being. So hopefully, so I did see that he is being transferred to the Supermax prison instead. So they're going to put him somewhere where it's harder to get out.
Oh, so he'll be down in it could send him up to Florence. It could send him up here to Colorado, where we have all kinds of great folks up here in Florence, at the Florence Supermax. The second update is that Los Angeles, we're with you. Watching what's happening in Los Angeles is horrifying. I don't know if you've seen the footage, Bryan, of the cop on horseback going after the guy on the ground.
I have not seen that. No.
Absolutely horrifying. You can tell the horse is like, no, I'm not supposed to do this. No. And it's check it out.
So
It's awful.
so trampling him?
He's
No.
trying to do something with that horse that he shouldn't be doing, in my opinion. And this guy's on the ground and cops are walking by, smack it. It's awful. Look it up. It's
Yeah,
it's just
disgusting.
we are
Freedom?
freedom. Are we winning yet? Bryan, do we have part three of two stories this time.
Yes.
I'm going first. Are you gonna have a part four or are you wrapping it
No,
up
I'm
today?
this the three,
Okay.
three this could have been an 8-part story if I'd wanted to, as could yours, I think.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I could
I
have.
decided to button this up.
So we're going to start by buttoning up my story first, Aesthetic Realism Part 3. I'm going to begin this third and final part by saying first, if you haven't listened to parts 1 and 2, you might want to do that because you're going to be lost. My third and final part in my coverage of aesthetic realism by turning to the works of two men. Michael Bluejay, who is an anti-cult activist and himself a second-generation former member of aesthetic realism. His mother was born into the cult, and Hal Lance, also a former member and participant in the consultation process. That is their term for realism's efforts to change homosexuals into heterosexuals. You recall that phrase, consultation with the three? The three being the three-man panel that helps you talk through your feelings and make you realize that you have contempt for women. And once that contempt goes away, you are no longer gay, apparently.
Right.
Michael
Makes
Bluejay's
sense.
website, Michael Bluejay's website, michaelbluejay.com, has several sections in it. It's a really cool website, Bryan. You should check it out because
I have,
he's
yeah.
oh yeah, he's
Yeah.
based in your old neck of the woods. Yeah. One's on electricity consumption. There's a couple on bicycling culture, one on vegetarianism, and there's a really cool one about socially responsible stocks and investing, which I think is very cool.
Oh, cool.
That's an interest of mine. In the top center of his landing page, there's a small inset with the text, I was born into a cult. Read all about it on Aesthetic Realism as a Cult. On this website, Blue Jay shares his story about being born into aesthetic realism and provides a wealth of testimony from former members like himself detailing their experiences. It was my starting point for research into this group, and I found several sources there, including the work of Hal Lance. And that's pronounced Lance like Lance a lot, but it's with an S, L-A-N-S-E, Hal Lance. Hal Lance makes several observations regarding the consultation process. He starts by noting that cults rely heavily on confessions. That is to say, members reveal secrets from their own past, secrets which are used as a means of control. And we've heard that about other cults, right?
Right, sure, right.
And this was no different with aesthetic realism, particularly as it pertains to the consultation process for homosexuals. For example, one member said, quote, "I had tried to make homosexuality work, but each year I was growing colder and further away from myself and people. I thought of suicide quite a bit." That is a very deep and personal pain that person has shared, right? That their identity is
Right. Yeah.
making them think of ending their lives. Lance continues his critique with the idea that aesthetic realism claims to be scientific, which, as we said last time, it is not. Specifically, Lance points to the lack of, quote, randomized control studies and lack of peer review. According to Lance, an aesthetic realism spokesperson who has a PhD in anthropology once made the claim online that, quote, neither, quote, statistics nor, quote, controlled experiments are necessary for science.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think the exact opposite is true. But
That person has a PhD in anthropology. Like Amanda Montell, Lance also points out the
Mhm.
use of language within cults, or what he calls loaded language, as a cult characteristic seen in aesthetic realism. Some phrases include the narrow self. That's the part of the unconscious mind that wants to have contempt for external reality. Remember, you can't have contempt for things and like the world. You have to get rid of that contempt. The narrow self. Getting a victory are the moments where you have contempt for something. Oh, did you get a good victory there? Feeling like
Okay,
you hated
right.
something? Did that feel good to you? Bilge is basically what you and I are doing now. Statements against aesthetic realism or Eli Siegel is called bilge. Members are referred to as Mr. and Ms. and then their last names. This stems from the time that Siegel felt that he was not getting enough respect from his students, so he made them start calling him Mr. Siegel. Changed. Homosexuality is not something that is cured. People are changed from homosexual to heterosexual. They are
Mhm.
changed, not cured. And then finally, their words for men who are gay and women who are gay: H and H persuasion for gay men, and L and L preference for lesbians. That's their terminology.
Okay.
H or H persuasion and L or L preference. But, you know, we see this loaded language. I mean, we have it in when I lived in Salt Lake City, and I knew students who had just come back from their missions. The LDS missionaries had their own language that, and I'm not suggesting that Mormonism is a cult. I'll get to my example in a moment. But for example, these missionaries had a few words that they would use, like D and C. Is that a word you've heard before in relation to Mormonism?
No,
It's their shorthand for the second book that they use outside the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine of the Covenants. They call it the D and C.
okay.
A missionary might ask someone, a fellow missionary, "Did you get any gators today?
No idea.
Did anybody bite? Did you get any bites? Did someone invite you in for lemonade
Oh,
and get to talk?" And my favorite, throwing bombs. Bombs, not as in BOMBS, BOMs, Book of Mormons. Throw any bombs
oh,
today? Did you land any bombs with someone? How many bombs did you give away? And then I thought about it and I thought, okay, that's really not fair to the LDS Church. And I started thinking about my upbringing and probably the most boring of Protestant religions, Methodism.
hmm.
And and I was like, I really can't think of anything that we used as a shorthand for something. And then I realized, well, I'm on the inside looking out. Of course, I'm not going to recognize it because I grew up speaking that language.
Right,
Then
right,
I
sure.
then I thought of one. In the Methodist Church, we use a second hymnal called the Cokesbury hymnal.
Okay.
The Cokesbury. So, hey, toss me that Coke. Can you give me that Coke? Let's get some Coke. So either people thought that our youth group meetings had a lot of cocaine and sugared sodas, or they were mistaking it for the Cokesbury hymnal, right? Give us a
Right.
Coke. Now let's take a look at the consultation process. This is from a transcript provided in the appendix of Lance's ebook. The dramatis personae are interrogators 1 and 2, who I will refer to as I1 and I2, and a man named Luke, last name starts with R, a man who has returned to homosexual relationships despite having been through the consultation process and being married to a woman named Bonnie, Bonnie R. This consultation takes place in front of an audience of other aesthetic realism members, including at least one of Luke's immediate family, his brother, who's there sitting watching his brother go through this. Okay. I had planned this section to be much longer, but I can't tolerate this nonsense, this horse shit.
Right,
So
right.
this could have been part three by itself, just me reading this transcript.
Uh,
So I okay, so here we go.
so this is highlights
This is highlights
or lowlights, right? Right.
and I didn't want to do it. I wanted to do it verbatim in an effort to, in their words, be completely fair to them, but I
Right.
just couldn't do it. It's just too long. So here we go. Interrogator one, I won. The purpose of this evening, as is the purpose of any meeting of students of aesthetic realism, is to see aesthetic realism and Mr. Siegel truly. And as we begin, one thing I feel very strongly about is the fact that we have a tremendous opportunity to be fair to the greatest knowledge and the greatest person who ever lived.
Mr. Siegel.
And I, and I think for every person here tonight, whatever is talked about, whatever is seen, this should be once and for all, every person deciding they want to be completely fair. That's one of their loaded language terms, completely fair to Eli Siegel and aesthetic realism, with all the joy and the beauty and the wonder that accompanies it. And I think it is a tremendous opportunity for people to really make up their minds. And he continues with some more opening remarks. Completely fair means do not criticize him at all. That's what that
Right.
means.
Right.
Continuing with I won. So first of all, as we begin, is it all right if I ask some questions? Luke, sure. I won. We'd like to have the facts as clear and as straightforward and as accurate as they can be so people can have an opinion. And right from the onset, we're not interested in gory details. We're simply interested in establishing some very basic things. In the last year, Luke R., have you been having H sex? Remember, H is their word.
Right.
Luke,
Hmm.
yes, I have. I won. And about how many times? Luke, maybe about 5 times. I won to an audience member. Yes. And then a male voice from the audience says, in a discussion I had with Luke R. on Friday, he told me about 12 times. You're making a face there, Bryan.
So I mean, yeah. So this is they're I mean, right. They're just going to torture this guy. They're going to shame him to death.
Luke, I'll say something about that. I did not say I had sex actually 12 times. I said that there was excursions made maybe 10 to 12 times in a year and a half. So he was cruising. He was just looking, didn't
Right.
necessarily
Right.
touch.
Which is right.
But I did not have sex every time. And I don't feel, I mean, at this point, no one prompted me to say anything. I feel I'm just saying exactly, there's nothing for me to protect or hide at this point. Male voice. I agree. Luke. And no one encouraged me or coaxed me to say anything. I felt it arose from something in myself. I won, cutting off Luke. Mr. R, don't start praising yourself. Luke, I'm not praising myself. I won. Yes, you are. The questioning continues, and they're trying to establish witnesses who knew about him returning to this, other members of aesthetic realism, the timeline. Luke reveals that he was cruising Reese Park, which is just near Rockaway. I'm not familiar with that part of New York. I won. All right. So the next thing is Bonnie R. You have been aware on a number of occasions that Mr. R, Luke, was not at home that night. Is that true? Bonnie, twice. I won and Bonnie then discuss the circumstances of Luke going out at night. She reveals that she confronted Luke and slapped him across the face. Bonnie, picking up. He said nothing happened. He just wanted to go for a ride. He couldn't sleep. I won and Bonnie then discuss if she talked with anyone. She did, possibly 3 other aesthetic realism members. Here's where I too jumps in, the second interrogator. I too. If I could ask you a question, you slapped him across the face. I just want to say that I find this disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
The
Why do you
slapping?
think it's why do you think it's disgusting, Bryan?
I was just about to comment that they're calling, the fact that they're calling these people interrogators is is just wrong. And so, but you stumped me though. I'm not sure why. I mean, because so she slapped him, and so
Her
this
husband, because he'd been out,
right, right.
and the interrogator, I don't know, I don't think they're actually called consultants. This interrogator is the word that is used by the critics.
Okay,
So they're actually called consultants. I'm using interrogators because that's what they're doing.
okay, okay.
Um,
So I too is upset. Why though? I missed it.
okay. I feel that it's hideous that Mr. Siegel is dead, and the two of you, the lowlifes that you are, would, and then he says something that can't be understood, would blank this garbage. And I think you're both defending yourselves in various ways right now. You knew more. You had suspicions. You slapped him across the face because you didn't believe him. He's disgusted at it because it's dishonoring and not showing enough gratitude and praise for aesthetic realism and
Oh,
being
okay.
disloyal to Eli Siegel. And it's nothing to do with the violent act of slapping somebody across the face. And as a note, there's no question in his statement. He starts by saying, I want to ask a question, and then proceeds to do that
No,
to her.
right, right.
Bonnie, but I didn't want to believe that he would do something like that. I didn't feel that. If anything, I thought he would look or something, but I didn't think that he would ever do anything outright. I too, with a raised voice. You suspected he was looking for homosexuality, and he was a man who had changed from H. You suspected he was looking for homosexuality. Don't dress it up. Bonnie, all right. And that's when the members of the crowd start getting into it, and you hear a Miss L and a Miss S and all of these other people just shouting at them basically. Here's the last quote I'll use. Male voice says, I wanted to ask Mrs. R, were you just thinking of yourself as a woman who a man could turn towards other men from? Let's unpack that. Were you thinking of yourself as a woman who a man could turn towards other men from? He could
It's
have
like a
said that a lot.
it's like a double negative. It's like wait, what?
So, in other words, do you consider yourself a woman that a man would look at you and go to another man? Is what he's trying to say.
Right, 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 right.
Were you thinking of the fact that this could harm aesthetic realism in this way, or were you just thinking of Bonnie R? And and this is the point when I thought that you would start losing your shit, and that's why I put. I'll stop here. I could go for ages and pages, but I think Bryan, with hopefully what I've shown here is that the session's point is not about helping the couple. It's
Right. I
about
mean, yeah,
protecting aesthetic realism.
right. I mean, the whole thing. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's not even veiled. It's just naked. Like they are a vehicle through which they can spew this propaganda and sort of further this agenda. But these two people could be any two people. I mean, it's clear. It's the cult mentality that once someone is now being held hostage by a cult and feels compelled to uh, to advance that cause. Every social interaction, every conversation is merely not only an opportunity to advance that goal, it's a compulsion to advance that goal. So I mean, it's
Yes,
disgusting.
absolutely. And
Right.
and once you're and in poker terms, we would say once you're pot committed to the cause,
Uh,
you put in more, you can't back out because you're pot
right,
committed,
right,
right?
right.
So later in this dialogue, which I'm done quoting them, they go into past instances where Luke and Bonnie were not sufficiently quote fair to Eli Siegel at Aesthetic Realism.
Yeah, fuck
It
you.
become it becomes a shouting contest at that point, and it really becomes not unlike the descriptions I've read of Synanon's game, right? Where you're put out front in front
Tear
of
him down,
everybody
tear
and
him
just
down, tear him down. Right,
torn down.
right,
It
right.
gets crueler and crueler as it goes on, and it becomes more and more inscrutable, really, even someone who's been reading about it, even tangentially like myself, because the more intense it gets, the more you hear that loaded language. That's your narrow self talking, and it just becomes this like
Right.
this word salad of just it means something to them, but to the outsiders, you're just like, what are you people talking about? And if I read this correctly, Luke eventually just gets up and leaves. Just goes.
All right, never mind.
Um, Now, back in part two, I committed a storytelling sin, Bryan. I
Hmm.
claimed that I had two initial thoughts when I first encountered aesthetic realism. I only answered thought number two, and that's what we've been talking about, the cult aspect of aesthetic realism. Right, we've been talking about that. I never did come back to number one. And that thought was, why hadn't I heard of aesthetic realism before now? It's been
Right.
around since the 40s. Why hadn't I heard about it? I'm 53 years old. I'm fairly well read, particularly in post World War II American history. I have multiple degrees in a field which requires examining forms of media, art, culture, and society. I've written film columns. I've written academic papers on visual communication, media theory, media ethics, and media history. So again, why hadn't I heard of realism before now? Admitting that I do have limited knowledge on the subject of media and arts criticism, even with those degrees in hand, right? No one can know everything. The answer to that question is the same as why the press didn't cover aesthetic realism at least as much as the aesthetic realists wanted from the 1940s onward. Because as a method to understanding the complexity of what it means to be human, it simply isn't very good.
Hmm.
Using opposites to describe a cultural artifact, such as a painting or a poem or a photograph, is fine, but it's hardly groundbreaking. And despite Sheldon Krantz was one of the earliest people who consulted and converted from homosexuality to heterosexuality. His claim that no one was talking about art in this way until after a 1955 showing at the Terrain Gallery held under the auspices of aesthetic realism, that's an isolated moment in mid-century New York art scenes. It's not all of human history. It's not even a blip, Bryan.
Right, of course.
And it's not true. Opposites appear in artistic and cultural critiques and philosophical examinations going back thousands of years. From an early age, maybe elementary school, but certainly middle school, you start to write comparison and contrast papers.
Right, of course. Yeah.
What are you doing there other than looking at what something is not, right? Also, there's a wide swath of human emotions between liking something and having contempt for it, which are two of the three suppositions of aesthetic realism,
Right,
right?
sure.
Because the vast majority of things fall into the
Right,
right?
like
Take it all,
98% of them.
yeah.
Right.
Like we were playing poker the other night and someone brought up we're talking about really great albums that stood the test of time, and someone brought up Boston's first album, and most people's reaction was I can take it or leave it.
Right.
No offense.
Right. Triumph. Yeah, maybe.
Let's consider the classical romantic split as popularly recounted in Robert Pirsig's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Pirsig searches for a way to connect classical thinking, how does something work, with romantic thinking, how does it make you feel? They're opposites. There must be a way to address both ways of looking at the world without favoring one or the other. They answer different questions. Pirsig calls these two ways the horns of the bull. If you wrestle with one of them, you're gored by the other one. He uses Plato's Phaedrus dialogue as a means to describe the common characteristic that classical and romantic thinking share. And this is something that becomes his kind of word: quality. Something is good. And you know quality when you see it. And it's very hard. It can be very hard to quantify. It can be very hard to describe. But you know when something has or exudes quality. You know you know something is good almost a priori, right? How do you know, Phaedrus? Asks Socrates. What is good and what is not good? Opposites are basic to human understanding. Yes, but this conception is not limited as the creation of a poet from the mid-20th century. Opposites exist as, in writer Grant Morrison's words, quote, the fundamental problem of philosophy. Why is there something instead of nothing? It's the most basic of questions, and it's one we've been asking long before aesthetic realism came along, right?
Right.
And for me, it really comes down to this inadequacy. And you brought up a good point. You avoided the bulls of the horn in the nature nurture argument last time when you said in the end it doesn't matter if it's nature or nurture. Pirsig would call that refusing to enter the arena with a bull. You deftly did that. Well, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter if it's nature or nurture. But for me, the pervasive need of aesthetic realists to refuse any and all critiques of Siegel and his work except that which offered gratitude and praise. And it's the belief that the use of aesthetic realism could solve any problem. For example, when one female member was diagnosed with cancer, not only was she forbidden from attending aesthetic realism functions, But Siegel claimed that the cause of cancer was, quote, contempt for the world expressed as a desire to separate oneself from the world.
Yeah, I mean, that's just ludicrous.
You got cancer because you have contempt.
Right.
We've heard that in other things, right? We've heard that in
Right.
other cults.
Right. You had it coming. Right.
As both a cancer patient and the spouse of an oncologist, she's a scientist, I can assure you this is not what causes cancer. Anne Stamler, who
Or
grew up in a
or cures it,
or
right?
cures it. Anne Stamler, who grew up in aesthetic realism, but finally left when she was 41, notes that, quote, Siegel believed that what he taught could end war, racism, poverty, and crime, and that he was singled out for hatred because he knew more than the authorities in any field.
Hmm. Of course you do.
That sounds suspiciously like the Dunning-Kruger effect writ large.
Right. Right.
People who never read Hegel or Aristotle, Stamler continues, called aesthetic realism the greatest thought of all time. Now, as to whether or not aesthetic realism can change a person from homosexual to heterosexual, the binary thinking of this claim is its weakness. It's its point of tautology. That's the point at which explanation can advance no further than its own claim, when further questioning cannot be supported.
Right.
Where does the earth set? On the shoulders of four elephants. What do those elephants stand on? Turtles? What are those turtles standing on? It's turtles all the way down, buddy. Um, that definition comes from James Anderson's book Communication Theory. Once you acknowledge that human sexuality isn't binary but instead a continuum, the claim falls apart. Turning to another pop culture reference from the film The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. We've never made great husbands, have we? Laments Alastair Hennessy to Steve Zissou in reference to Eleanor, ex-wife to both men. Of course, I've got a good excuse. I'm part gay. Zissou responds, supposedly everyone is. Do you remember that scene with
Yeah.
Bill Murray and Jeff Goldblum? Plus, conversion therapy sucks. It's abuse, full stop, no matter how it's dressed up, even as so-called choice. Or consultation, as the aesthetic realists would put it. Those reportedly converted from homosexuality perhaps slid a little further down to this heterosexual end of the spectrum, or they lived in a lavender marriage, or they denied their own feelings, or they were ostracized because of their sexual identity, or they were trying to conform, or just about anything else other than true conversion. These folks were put in untenable situations by a society that simply could not accept homosexuality as a valid component of being human. Add that to the pressures of wanting to conform to their peer group, consisting of aesthetic realists. It's no wonder people claimed conversion. And they did so publicly in 1979 with a full page ad taken out in the New York Times Magazine and other publications. The ad features signatures from all the men and women who are ostensibly consultation success stories, having been changed from homosexual to heterosexual. According to Michael Bluejay's website, 76% of the signatories attesting to the consultation process have left the group.
I'm stunned it's not higher.
Uh, uh, 3 out of 4,
Right.
right?
Right.
Eli Siegel died on November 8th, 1978. Michael Bluejay uses excerpts from the New York Times obituary. See, they covered him. They covered aesthetic realism to explain yet another public display of veneration by the aesthetic realists in regards to their leader. The Aesthetic Realism Foundation refused to reveal the clinical cause of Siegel's death, but in a news release stated that Siegel, quote, get your boots on, Bryan. It's about to get deep.
No.
But in a news release stated that Siegel, quote, died of a broken heart, having suffered for over 50 years from injustices of the press and the literary world. As per Wikipedia, the aesthetic realism education chair, Ellen, and I do not know how to pronounce her name, Reiss. I've been saying Rice, but I don't know if that's right. Ellen Rice attributed his death to prostate surgery performed 5.5 months prior to his death. The Aesthetic Realism Foundation has repeatedly claimed that Siegel died as a result of surgical complications. Yet the aforementioned anthropologist, the one who didn't like the scientific method I mentioned earlier, he uses the phrase that Siegel, quote, chose to die with dignity.
Okay.
He drank the hemlock, right?
Right.
in reference to Siegel's death. So the chain of thinking is this: the surgery was botched, which, quote, damaged Siegel irreparably and ruined his life. That's also from that anthropologist. Siegel took his own life, but it's not the act of suicide that killed him. It's the surgery that started it all. This strikes me as another example of obfuscation via
Yeah.
language on the part
Right.
of the aesthetic realists.
It's spin. Right. Right. Mhm.
Another note, and I'm wrapping things up here. This is by far the longest story I think I've ever done. Another note to which I must return in both the spirit of fairness and for the purposes of a story structure pertains to actor William Atherton. It was my
I was
interest in
about to
his
ask.
it was my interest in his career that led to this story after all. And remember, I told you I'm an Atherton fan. I love his
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
his work. He's a great actor. I am making no judgment on William Atherton as a person or upon his sexual identity, and I'm most certainly not claiming any efficacy for the consultation process of aesthetic realism, because that's all in a word, absolute horseshit. I'm sorry, that was two words. But I do feel the need to point out that Atherton married Ms. Bobby, Bobbi, Golden, Goldin, on December 8th, 1980. As far as I can tell, they're still married.
Yeah.
It's not my place to speculate on that marriage.
Right.
It's
Of
not.
course not.
Um, in summation, in my opinion, aesthetic realism fits several criteria of being a cult, particularly in the use of language, as per Amanda Montell. The veneration of a leader in their teachings, in this case, Eli Siegel in aesthetic realism, and the attempts to isolate new members as seen in the consultation tapes. Right? I mean, you're afraid to lose what you have in that new group of people if they're going to shun you because you've already cut everybody else out of your life.
Right.
So again, please consult Michael Bluejay's website, michaelbluejay.com, and freedomofmind.com from Dr. Stephen Hassan for more information on cult behavior and how to effectively manage loved ones who may be falling down into a morass of cult thinking. And once again, this is dedicated to all the folks out there who are celebrating Pride Month, particularly friends and members of my own family. They live every day with pride in their identity, regardless of the month. Screw conversion therapy. Much love to you from here in Colorado and from the Dream Idiots podcast.
So how many? So first question is, how many adherents to this insanity are there?
I
how many followers do we know?
I believe they're down, according to Michael Bluejay's website, he thinks they're going to die out within a decade, and they're down to about 66 members, anywhere between 66
Oh,
and
okay.
75 members.
Okay.
Yeah.
So okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is just part and parcel of every single cult story you've ever heard. Find someone who is, weak, marginalized, on the fringe, separate them from their family. Create this, we're your new family. We're gonna, separate you from them. We're gonna, cobble together whatever resources you have and make them our own. And you cannot question the supreme leader at all. I mean, I'm sorry, but this is Trump. This is if you question to a MAGA person even now, even with National Guard in L.A., etc.
Mhm.
If you talk to a devout Trumper, stunningly they're still out there. Their immediate response is not just being slightly miffed or irritated at your question. I mean, they get angry instantaneously because you can't question the supreme leader. So it's the same playbook. It's
Yep.
fucking disgusting.
Yep. And when you
Yep.
listen to the way that they were kind of shouting down Luke and Bonnie, if
Right.
you've ever listened to, and I don't really recommend doing this, and you just really want to check it out, the final White Knight tapes from Jonestown, the night all those people were murdered down in Jonestown,
Right.
there's a woman who stands up and says, "This is not right." And everybody starts shouting her down. Right.
Right.
Sources for this story, boy, there's a lot of them. Aestheticrealism.net, James Anderson's 1997 book, Communication Theory, Epistemological Foundations from Guilford Press in New York and London. BroadwayWorld.com for info on William Atherton's excellent acting career. FreedomofMind.com, Dr. Stephen Hassan's site on his BITE model of cult control. Sheldon Krantz, who's the editor slash compiler of the 1969 book, Aesthetic Realism, We Have Been There, 6 artists on the Siegel Theory of Opposites. That's from Definition Press of New York. That's their printing house, the Aesthetic Realism printing house. Sheldon Krantz, compiler of the 1971 book, The H Persuasion, How Persons Have Permanently Changed from Homosexuality Through the Study of Aesthetic Realism with Eli Siegel, also from Definition Press in New York. Hal Lance's ebook, Erasing Reason Inside Aesthetic Realism, a cult that tried to turn queer people straight. MichaelBlueJay.com. Amanda Montell's 2021 book, Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism from Harper Wave in New York. Grant Morrison, May 1989 issue of Doom Patrol, number 22, The Ossuary, National Periodical Publications in New York. The Phil Donahue TV program, that was mainly in part 2, from WGN on 10/14/81, Are Gays Born This Way? Eli Siegel's 1981 book, compiled and published posthumously, Self and World, An Explanation of Aesthetic Realism from Definition Press in New York. Ann Stamler's excellent, and just short and concise article from 2011, Born and Raised in Aesthetic Realism, in ICS Today, Volume 2, Number 3. And that ICSA stands for the International Cultic Studies Association. And they meet once a year in a national conference to discuss what's going on
Oh, wow.
in the world of combating cults and cult control. Wikipedia for basic bioinfo and information on Baltimore City College, which was way back, I think, in part 1.
And we'll here with the new website, we will do a much better job of putting sources. So here shortly, we'll tag team and figure out a way to put those sources online as well. So so they'll be linked in the page, the blog post page for this episode. Not immediately, but here very soon.
And I will get this could have been 4 parts like yours, Bryan, but I'd had enough of these assholes, so it was time to wrap it up and move on.
You maxed out.
Kudos again, though, to people like Michael Blue Jay and Hal Lance and Amanda Montell, who, Steve Hassan, who are fighting the good fight against this way of thinking. And as a preview, I'm going to do something lighthearted next week because I was in Chicago, as you know, last week, and I've got A Tale of Two Restaurants Part 4 coming up.
That's next week?
Yes. And I did a personal taste test of 2
field work
for this story.
We give and we give and we give here.
It's Chicago, so I will let you guess as to what the food product is. But
Euros? No.
I will reveal
tortillas.
I will reveal that next week when I do Tales Restaurant Part 4. So cool. Chicago edition. And Bryan, I stepped in and stole your thunder for the curse word of the week because this came up in conversation and I had to bring it out. Bryan, you ever heard the term Cooter Brown?
Oh, you know what? I think that rings a bell.
My son texted us from Japan saying that he's been looking out for signs that are translated from Japanese into English and seeing how well they're doing. And he found a place that was called Cooter Binding. And he was real concerned as to what they were doing in that store. And that made me think of Cooter Brown. Cooter Brown is a term that dates from the American Civil War, and legend has it that Cooter Brown was a gentleman who lived right on the Mason-Dixon line. And so he was eligible for conscription by both the Union and the Confederate.
Okay, right.
And because he had friends and family on both sides, he didn't want to fight and kill nobody. So he decided his best course of action was to get shit-faced and stay drunk for the entirety of the war. There's a second version that casts him as a half African American, half Cherokee Indian living in a Louisiana swamp who does the exact same thing. Lives in a little hut that was given to him by a Cajun fur trapper. And he decides to stay drunk the whole time. He was also Cooter Brown. And apparently one night his hut burned up, but no trace of Cooter was ever found. People believed he had so much alcohol in his system, he just burst into flames. So if you hear somebody say to you, man, you're drunker than Cooter Brown, that's what they're talking about. So there's our curse word of the week from American Civil War, Cooter Brown, when you are absolutely shit-hammered.
That's funny.
All right.
Okay.
Hello, so Bryan, we're back. Yes, it's your turn for your part 3 of the Gunslinger. And as I recall, your main character has been wreaking havoc all over Missouri.
Yes, she's just a delightful lady. You might want to go back and listen to or watch on YouTube episodes 150 and 151 prior to listening to this. But this story, kind of in a weird way, stands on its own fairly well. So, September 1964, we're talking about a woman named Sharon Kinne, the gunslinger. She is now waiting around for what's going to be her third retrial in the death of her husband, James. It's set to begin in October in about 6 or 7 weeks' time. And she's getting just pretty tired of this bullshit and people picking on her. And she wants a vacation. So she decides to quit her job and she applies for unemployment. So at least she can hang out with her kids. But if you're waiting around to be put on trial for murder, you're probably under some stress. So she's probably a little bit jittery. She heads down to the nearest unemployment office, and there she sees a man named Francis Samuel Puglisi. Francis goes by Frank. He is working on some paperwork in the office there, and she decides that she's going to make herself incredibly available. Goes over to him, is being flirty with him, offers to help him with the paperwork that he has there, and Frank. I mean, in the prior episodes we learned that she can just men just follow her around like crazy, and Frank also, like the others, he is on the hook immediately. On the paperwork he fills out, he says he works as a hairdresser and also has some training as a blacksmith. In reality, he's a thief and a con man. That's his real job. So they're perfect together. Frank, prior to this, had moved around a lot, spent some time in California, was in jail in Nevada for about 8 months because police were outside a electronics store in 1964 at 3 a.m. when Frank walked out the back door carrying a television set. So he was a guest of the state. Upon his release, he headed east and found himself in Missouri. New targets, new projects, new cons. This is what he does.
Sure.
Sharon, doesn't ask him about his past.
Sharon, I got to tell you, there's something I'm going through right now. You ever heard of a fellow named Eli Siegel?
They're happy to create a facade here. She doesn't ask him any questions. He doesn't ask her any questions. And incredibly, at this time, according to the terms of her bail, Sharon, even though she's waiting trial for murder, she is free to travel anywhere she wants to travel, including out of the country, provided she is back in time for her trial. So Sharon tells her family that she wants to, life is just stressful and I need a break. I'm going to take a 2-week vacation and go down to Mexico with Frank.
And she finds a country named non-extraditiono, and she moves there.
Right.
So are they in this kind of relationship where she's like, I know that you know what I know that you know about yourself, that they both know that they're kind of
It seems like they're
like,
happily ignorant. Like, yeah, I don't, it seems like maybe
okay.
I don't really, I'm not going to ask
Willfully,
questions.
blissfully
Yeah, it's like,
ignorant. Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
I mean, it's in the book this is based on is called Just an Ordinary Girl by James
Okay,
Hayes. It seems like I sort of skipped some pieces of it
okay.
because he really gets into a lot of quote unquote details, which are things. A lot of it seems like stuff he couldn't possibly know. And I don't know whether some of this was taken from family members or what his account comes from. But basically, they're happy that they have sex a lot. They fight like cats and dogs, and that's about it. That's all of her relationships, though. It's sex and
Yeah,
arguing.
sounds like it.
It's all she does.
So now she's doing it down in Mexico with Francis.
Well, she's trying to. They hop in a car and they drive to Laredo. They tell authorities at the border in Laredo that they're headed to Mexico City to get married. The car isn't registered, so they have to leave the car there, of all things. So they cross the border and get imagine being on a bus in Mexico in the 60s, all the way to Mexico City. I don't know how long that would take, but 6 weeks. So they're on a bus all the way to Mexico City. Frank buys a gun at some point. He doesn't know that Sharon is already traveling with a gun, already has one in her possession. They checked into the Hotel Gin in Mexico City, and they're pretty much instantly sick because of the food and the water. So this vacation's not going great. They spend like the first 36 or 48 hours just in their room because they don't really want to venture too far from a toilet. And Sharon is apparently just begging Frank to go out and find a pharmacy, find something bland, find something, do something helpful. And his response is basically, "Fuck you. I'm going to get some sleep. If you want to go out and find whatever you think is going to help, by all means. It's the middle of the night. Go forage if that's what you feel like you have to do." So she does. It should be noted that neither one of them speak word one of Spanish. And Sharon goes out, and she wanders into another hotel, the Del Prado Hotel, and she goes there. She's pointed in that direction because she gets a recommendation that they sort of cater to Americans, and it's a nicer hotel than where they're staying. But it's the middle of the night. She goes there, and their little pharmacy is closed. There's no buying anything.
And they're tired of her running up and down the street, shouting, "Where is the Imodium?" as loudly as she can.
Right. So she wanders into the bar in this hotel and gets
Oh, that'll help.
gets and gets a is given a glass of water. That's not going to help. Um, and is bitching loudly to herself that she wishes she could find at least one person who spoke English. And then a man at the bar says very, very clearly, "Well, some of us speak perfect English." His name is Francisco Paredes Ordonez. And he obviously thinks he struck gold. So he is. I think he's a native Mexican, but divides. I mean, mostly lives in America. Tells her he actually. I don't know whether this is true or not, but says he does voiceover work in the '60s for TV commercials.
Oh, really?
And so it's whatever. It's midnight. This pretty American blonde woman walks in, and Sharon is happy to find anyone who can speak English, and she's pissed at Frank, and she's kind of probably wanting male attention anyway, in spite of feeling like dog shit. So after a couple hours of boozing, they obviously wind up at Francisco's hotel. Duh, that's the obvious next step. The exact nature of what happens next is not exactly known. The Hayes book has what I only assumed is a fictionalized summary of what he thinks must have happened. Maybe Sharon was planning on killing him. Maybe she just wanted to rob him. Maybe she just wanted to have sex. But whatever happens, I guess she claimed later on was being aggressive. Maybe he had it coming. There's a staffer at this hotel that hears gunshots, and he rushes to the room. As this man charges into the room, Sharon shoots the guy. The staffer coming to check the room, shoots him in the shoulder, and is aiming to take a second shot when this guy manages to wrestle the gun away from her. Francisco is naked and in bed with two holes in his chest, and Francisco no está aquí. Francisco, he's very, very dead. The Hayes book, that is the primary source, says he's shot in the chest. At least one other account indicates he was shot in the back. Either way, Francisco is gone.
And that's the story of the first La Quinta.
So the staffer survives, calls the police. Sharon is obviously arrested again.
Good Lord.
This is all in. I mean, I think she's 26 at this point.
And how many men has she killed then? 3?
This is number 3.
Oh my God.
So La Policía go to room 406 at Hotel Gin, and they arrest Frank too, even though he's only guilty of having diarrhea. The media dub her La Pistolera, the gunslinger. That's why I called it this. So the Hayes book again, has a boatload of details here that are not worth getting into. For a certain period of time, Kansas City police don't know where she is at all, but they are then notified or learn of her arrest somehow, and then everything in Missouri is on hold. Tests later on reveal that the gun that Sharon has in Mexico is definitely the one that shot Patricia Jones. So they are able to prove that without a doubt later on, because you'll recall Sharon is shot 4 times. The 4th bullet went straight through Patricia into the dirt below. Perfect match to the gun that Sharon has with her in Mexico. So Sharon goes on trial in Mexico for murdering Francisco. Mexico, the criminal process down there is a little bit different, and she's charged with attempting the murder of Francisco and then attempted murder of the staffer. She claims she's going to claim self-defense, but it's not that cut and dried. Frank is also very aggressively questioned, but tells authorities through a translator. Frank is now just done. He's only just met this woman. He says through a translator that Sharon is just a hitchhiker. He picked her up somewhere after crossing the border. He doesn't know who she is, and she wanted to ride to Mexico City, and he agreed, and he has no idea who Sharon Kinne is, and they believe him, and they just deport him back to the U.S. So Frank is in the clear.
And quite possibly dodged a bullet.
Frank wisened up in a big hurry.
Ugh.
So the Mexican legal system, there's no jury for Sharon. She is given her attorney in Missouri comes down briefly, but he's not allowed to represent her. She's given a Mexican attorney. There's a three-judge panel, and she's just being held in a Mexican jail in 1964, which sounds awful. There's no bail. She thought she'd be allowed bail again down there. So while this three judge panel investigates this case, she's in jail waiting basically. And there's no trial necessarily. She's held. They go off and do their work and investigate this crime, and then she's just brought in and told basically after the fact, oh yeah, by the way, Sharon, yeah, you're guilty of murder. We're keeping you for a while. She's sentenced to 10 years. Sharon, of course, thinks 10 years is obscene. She appeals, and upon further review, that panel says, yeah, 10 years is actually too lenient. Fuck you, 13 years. Make it 13.
Oh,
Um, so so sh so Sharon starts her time in prison. She doesn't really get many visitors because she's not native, not local, obviously. On at least one occasion, some tourists who had been following her story in the press back in America were down there went to visit her just for shits and grins, and she agreed to see them because she has nothing better to do. Oh
actually, I
yeah,
don't blame her. Yeah.
oh yeah. So various reporters, a writer with Time magazine, came to see her and interviewed her. She doesn't have a lot to do. She enjoys going to meals. They do put on movies there, so she occasionally does like watching movies that they show there in the facility. She is starting to learn Spanish. She tries to catch up on news of the outside world. Um, and she's there for 4 years, getting to the end of 1969.
Oh,
And
wow.
there,
Okay. All right.
there's a routine bed check, and you may recall the end of the movie Shawshank Redemption.
Spoilers.
Authorities enter her room, or her room isn't. She apparently it sounds like she's just fastidious. Her room is very very neat. Her bed is made, clothes folded, everything's put in its place. Sharon is not there. They
Hmm.
assume that she must be hiding somewhere in the facility. She's in a where they screen the movie. She's in the mess hall. She's in a
Hmm.
closet. She's hiding somewhere. After several hours of looking, they don't find her, and then they have to disclose to higher authorities that Sharon Kinne has managed to escape this prison. To this day, it's not known how she managed it. Rumors abound because rumors always, flare up when weird things like this happen. Francisco's family must have arranged it. We're going to help you get out, and then the second you get out, we're going to kill you. That was one rumor. Um, she obviously paid off the guards, or she paid off the DA, or she paid off somebody. She's a wealthy-ish, American, quote unquote. And this prison was known to be understaffed. And lo and behold, there's a very critical door on one side of the prison that they find was left unlocked conveniently. There's an extensive search that they roll out for a period of time. Um, for 2 weeks, they're searching high and low for her. And the DA then announces after 2 weeks, she's a tiny woman now. She is fluent in Spanish. She can blend in. We think she headed south. We think she probably crossed
Oh, wow.
into Guatemala, and she's somewhere else in the Spanish speaking world. But we don't think she's here now. We don't think she's in Mexico any longer. And that's where the Hayes book on Sharon Kinne ends, because that book was published in 2011. Okay.
Okay.
December of 2023, Jackson County Sheriff's Office and Kansas City Police both get an anonymous tip that Sharon had been living in the town of Tabor, Alberta, Canada,
Oh,
120 miles southeast of Calgary. under the name Deirdre Glabus. She went by the nickname D. Under Canadian law, law enforcement agencies start sharing information, and because someone after Deirdre had died, had asked her, they wouldn't ordinarily have done fingerprints, but you can, as a keepsake or memento, take hand impressions or fingerprint impressions for the family to have as a keepsake, right? So
Sure.
that had been done. These fingerprints are then made available, and these fingerprints are conclusively matched to Sharon. And U.S. authorities, announced that Sharon is dead. They announced this in January 17th of 2025. This was the longest outstanding warrant in, I think, Missouri history. What
Holy cow.
what they were able to figure out after the fact, even though she escaped this prison, Sharon managed to get back across the border into California, uh, almost immediately, because 2 months after her jailbreak, she's getting married again. She met a man and married him 2 months later, a guy named James Thomas Glabus in L.A. in February 1970. So that's 2 months after she gets out. They moved to Tabor in '73. They ran a motel for a period of time. Were in real estate a little bit. They're able to find old advertisements from the local newspaper. No one really knows how she managed to get a travel visa or any sort of ID for all of this. In August of '79, her husband, Glabus, dies from a combination of diabetes and being a drunk. She's left out of the will. She fights the will in court, but fails. She marries again, the guy named William L. in '82. L dies in 2011 at the age of 79, and then Sharon herself dies of coronary artery disease and Alzheimer's January 21st of 2022. Freaking artery disease and Alzheimer's, and her headstone falsely has her birth year is 1940. So Sharon left behind one son with the marriage to Glabus, and of course she still had three children back in Independence, Missouri. She had her two children with James, and then or she gave birth to the other child
Right.
with with the lover with him. Uh, and in Tabor, she apparently was a completely law-abiding citizen. She did volunteer work. She was a chairwoman for a daycare center. She was known for doing needlepoint and playing bridge, and you know she got away with it basically.
So they were wrong. She didn't go
No,
south.
they were
She went
wrong, or they're
El
making it up.
Norte.
Right? Yeah, but she is cray.
That's so when's the movie coming out? This
I
is
know. That's why I'm just trying to imagine who should play that role. Hmm.
well, if this had been made in the 70s, Goldie Hawn. Um
Right.
that's an again, this is one of those things where it's how haven't I heard of this woman?
I don't know.
So in Mexico, I don't know much about the legal system there. Do they not have jury trials at all? Is it all bench
Uh,
trials or panel trials by three judges
at
or
least, well, I mean, it may vary by jurisdiction. It may have been something that happened at the time. I really have no idea. I mean, I know those processes can vary wildly across different countries. So I'm not really sure how it is. It doesn't surprise me that they wouldn't bother with juries down there. It's because because it would be very difficult to do probably. But somehow she managed to get out and make it all the way back to, who knows where she crossed. She must have crossed again, probably in Texas, I would imagine, and then made her way all the way to California and kept her nose clean or clean enough the rest of the way.
and snuck past someone in North Dakota or Minnesota or Montana or
Somewhere up there,
wow.
right?
That is a crazy story. This needs to be a movie or a TV miniseries or
Yeah.
something. This is that's great, Bryan. That is what a she packed a lot of living in,
Yeah.
and then she got away with it for what 52 years? She was on the run and
No,
wow,
50, yeah, 56 years. Yeah.
man.
So there you have it. Sharon Kinney. She sounds a lot like someone I would probably date, but
Oh, shit. Well,
And on
yes,
that
but
note,
but less violence.
right, right,
Less violence is
minus
shared.
minus the violence, right?
Well, folks, Bryan, that was an excellent story. That's you should start working on the screenplay now, I think.
Okay, I will.
Yeah, that's good. I never want to really think about aesthetic realists again, but um wow. And
Yeah.
this was interesting doing two three-parters at the same time.
Hmm.
This was interesting.
Yeah. So so
So,
so, so next week, probably lighter fare for a while. I have a series of just of standalone episodes coming up. I
as
think
do I.
you know,
Yeah.
lighter fare, but down the road, I'm gonna offer up my next three-parter is going to be all three in a row stories about trains. One of which is a true crime coming up,
Ooh,
but that'll be the research on that's going to take a while.
very cool.
So
Well, thank you, Bryan. Thank you, listeners, for hanging out with
absolutely.
us. Take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. Be good to each other. What else, Bryan?
Check out the website, dreamidiots.com. Give us a review. Give us 5 stars on whichever platform you're on. Like, share, do whatever you can. If you have any curse word ideas, story ideas, any other nonsense you want to share with us, I may have another Tale of Two Restaurants idea too. It occurs to me that someone sent me.
Cool.
Yeah. Any way you'd like to get plugged in with us would be great. We appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Bryan.
Bye.
Bye.